Some stories begin with a whisper, others start with a scream, but this one began with a pair of scissors, a cruel laugh, and the moment a quiet girl refused to be broken. This is the story of Mariah Bennett, new kid, outsider, and the girl they should have never underestimated. The sun was too bright for a Monday morning, the kind of washed-out light that made everything feel exposed, like the whole town had been scrubbed clean and set out for inspection. Rows of identical two-story houses lined the streets of Ash Grove Heights, each with a trimmed lawn, a flagpole, and a spotless SUV parked in the driveway. Like they were all competing for some silent prize in suburban perfection. In the back seat of her mother's well-worn Toyota Corolla, Mariah Bennett sat still, watching the scenery roll past through the smudged glass window. She wasn't impressed by the picture-perfect lawns or the overpriced houses. She wasn't intimidated by the gleaming high school brochures or the top-rated district label her mother kept mentioning like it meant something. Mariah had learned not to put faith in labels. Labels were easy to manipulate. People were harder. Her mother didn't say much during the drive. She rarely did these days. Their conversations had grown colder over the past year, shrinking down to necessary exchanges about groceries, bills, and appointments. No good luck. No, you've got this. Just silence and the occasional sigh. When they pulled into the circular front lot of Ash Grove High School, her mother adjusted the rearview mirror, checked her lipstick, and muttered under her breath, "Just do your best." She didn't look at Mariah when she said it. She didn't have to. The message was clear. Don't cause problems. Don't draw attention. Be invisible if you can. Mariah stepped out of the car with her backpack slung over one shoulder, the door clicking shut behind her like the end of a chapter. For a few seconds, she just stood there, staring at the school building ahead. Its polished brick walls, spotless windows, and a giant banner above the entrance that read, "Excellence through unity." Unity. She nearly laughed. Students streamed through the front doors in clusters, laughing, chatting, some already FaceTiming friends as they walked. No one looked at her directly, but she could feel it. The curiosity, the judgment, the faint ripple of whispers that always followed someone who looked like her but didn't belong. Ash Grove High wasn't used to girls like Mariah. Black, reserved, sharp-eyed. She wasn't loud, she wasn't flashy, but she carried herself with a kind of calm that unsettled people who couldn't place it. And in a place like this, where being different was considered disruptive, Mariah's very presence felt like a challenge. The first thing she noticed when she stepped inside was the smell. It wasn't the chemical scent of bleach and metal she remembered from her old school. It was soft, lemon-scented, curated, intentional. Even the hallways gleamed, the blue and white floor tiles polished like a showroom. Everything about this place screamed order, but not the kind of order that welcomed you. It was the kind that expected you to comply or leave. Her homeroom teacher, Ms. Claiborne, greeted her with a thin smile and a voice just a touch too sweet. "Welcome to Ash Grove, Mariah. We've heard great things." There was something about the way she said great things that made it feel like a warning disguised as praise. Mariah just nodded and took the seat assigned to her. Back row, far left. Out of sight. The first few hours passed like fog. Teachers droned through syllabi. Students side-eyed her like she was a new animal at the zoo. During lunch, she carried her tray like a shield, scanning the room for an empty seat. Most of the tables were already claimed by laughing cliques that moved like tribes. She settled for a corner table near the far window, where the light didn't quite reach. There she ate in silence, as she always had. As she knew how to. That was when she saw them. 3 boys. Tall, loud, white. They walked like they owned something, like nothing in the world had ever told them no. Austin Rader and his two shadows, Jason Brent. Austin had that look, polished, confident, dangerous in the way charm could be used as a mask. When his eyes landed on Mariah, he didn't frown. He smiled, but not the kind of smile that welcomed you. It was the kind that sized you up, like he'd already decided who she was, like he'd seen 1,000 girls like her before, like she was just another story he could write and erase without ever learning her name. Mariah didn't blink, didn't smile, didn't look away. She just stared back, calm, steady. And from that moment on, the game began. They just didn't know they were the ones who would lose. It started with little things, barely noticeable at first. A shoulder bump in the hallway that felt a bit too intentional. A pencil that went missing from Mariah's desk, only to reappear snapped in half. Whispers behind her as she walked past. Laughter that cut off just a beat too late. No one ever said her name, but she could feel it. The isolation, the testing. She told herself it would pass, that it was just noise, but it didn't pass. It escalated. By the second week, the boys had gotten bolder. Brandon liked to drop comments under his breath. "Straight out of Compton," he said one day during chemistry, when she answered a question faster than anyone else. Kyle added, "Bet she learned that in hood school." When she didn't react, Brandon doubled down. Probably traded crack for a calculator. They laughed. The teacher didn't say a word. She said nothing too. Not because it didn't hurt, but because she'd learned a long time ago that sometimes silence was the only thing they didn't know how to handle. But silence has limits. It happened on a Wednesday. The sky was low and gray, and the school had that strange midweek quiet, like even the walls were tired of pretending everything was fine. In sixth period, art class, the students had been given a free hour to work on their own projects. Some sketched, others gossiped. The teacher, Ms. Fletcher, was in the corner helping a student sort through portfolio pieces. No one was really paying attention. Mariah sat near the window, her sketch pad open, pencil in hand. She wasn't drawing anything specific, just shapes, shadows, movement. Keeping her hands busy, her mind calm. She didn't notice Brandon approaching from behind, didn't hear the safety scissors being pulled from the art bin, didn't sense the room shifting until it was already too late. There was a sudden, unnatural tug at the back of her head, a metallic snip, then silence. Her fingers froze mid-stroke. Her body locked, not from pain, but from something colder, familiar. She reached back slowly. Her hand came away holding the frayed, severed end of her braid. Thick, tight, coiled, gone. Laughter exploded behind her. Brandon stood grinning, holding the rest of her braid like it was a prize. "Yo!" he shouted, swinging it in the air. "I thought she needed to lighten the load. This stuff heavy, right?" Kyle slapped his desk, howling. Jace gasped. "Dude, that's messed up." Austin, lounging nearby, smirked and said, "Damn. Didn't think you'd actually do it. Bold move. Think she's gonna cry?" More laughter, a few gasps. Some students watched in horror. Others just watched. Miss Fletcher was still across the room, still talking, still not seeing. Mariah didn't turn around. She didn't speak. She stared at the braid in her hand like it was something sacred that had been defiled. Not just hair, a piece of her. Brandon leaned in behind her, voice low and slick, like they were sharing a secret. "Don't take it personal. Just a little makeover. You always so serious, figured I'd help." That's when she stood. The scrape of her chair against the floor sliced through the noise. The laughter faltered. Someone said, "Uh-oh." She turned slowly, not shaking, not crying, just still. Brandon took a step back. "It's not like it was real or anything," he mumbled. "Chill." Mariah's voice was quiet. "You think that makes it better?" Kyle jumped in, trying to shift the blame. "It's just hair, right? No harm meant." Austin added with a smirk, You wear it like armor. People are going to test it. That's how it works. She looked at him now, her gaze hard as tempered glass. You think this is about hair? The braid fell to the floor with a soft thud, and then everything changed. When security arrived, Mariah was already standing by the stairwell, hands behind her back, the severed braid dangling from her grip like proof. She didn't run. She didn't cry. She didn't yell or flail or fight. She just stood still, and that somehow rattled them more than if she had. They took her to the front office in silence, past students whispering in the hallways, past teachers pretending not to notice. She didn't look at any of them. She didn't need to. Behind the closed door of the main office, Principal Eric Lawson was waiting. He didn't look shocked when she walked in, flanked by 2 campus officers. Didn't gasp, didn't posture. He simply dismissed the staff with a nod and gestured for Mariah to sit. The braid was still in her hand. Her fingers curled around it tightly like she hadn't decided whether it was something to defend or something to bury. Lawson sat across from her, elbows resting on the desk, hands folded, his posture deliberate, steady, not stiff. The room was silent for a long beat, just the hum of the HVAC system and the faint echo of the world outside still spinning. I read the report from Ms. Fletcher, he said calmly. Says you broke a student's nose and sent another to the nurse with a sprained wrist. Mariah didn't answer. He didn't push, just sat with her in the silence. Then he asked, why? Her voice was soft, not defensive, just tired. They cut my hair. Lawson nodded, not in surprise, more like confirmation of something he already suspected. I figured, he said. I watched the hallway footage. You didn't run. You didn't resist. You waited. He paused, letting his words settle. That's not how someone reacts when they just snap. She looked at him now, eyebrows slightly raised. She hadn't expected that, not from a man in a button-up and tie who could have buried her under policy and procedure and called it a day. Most people, Lawson continued, hear black girl punches 3 white boys, and that's all they need. That's the headline. Violent, angry, threat. He leaned back, voice lower now. But I always ask, what happened before the fight? What got ignored? What got dismissed as just a joke? Mariah's fingers loosened slightly around the braid. I didn't want to fight, she said. I just wanted to get through the day. Go home. Breathe. Then why didn't you walk away? She looked him dead in the eye. Because I've been walking away. I've walked away from every name, every bump, every lie, and it just got worse. She opened her palm, showing him the jagged, frayed edge of the braid. And then they took this. Lawson stared at the hair. He didn't flinch, didn't soften, but there was something different in his eyes now. Something like fire buried under ash. It's not just hair, he said quietly. No, Mariah replied. It never is. He leaned back in his chair with a long breath, then reached into the drawer and pulled out a manila envelope. This is your suspension, he said. 3 days, mandatory. I don't have a choice on that. I figured, she said again. But I'm not expelling you, he added, sliding the envelope across the desk. They're going to push for it, those boys' parents, maybe the district. But I'm not doing it. In fact, he paused. I'm filing my own report. Mariah's eyes narrowed. Why? Because I'm tired too, he said. I've spent years walking the line between what they expect me to do and what I know is right. And today, those 2 things no longer match. She didn't speak, but something in her posture shifted, like she was waiting to believe him, but not quite there yet. He continued, if they want to escalate, they're going to have to go through me. I'll request classroom footage. I'll make noise. I'll ask the questions they don't want to answer. Mariah looked down at the envelope, then back up at him. And if they try to bury it, then we dig it up louder. She held his gaze for a moment, then finally nodded. Just once. It wasn't a promise. It wasn't forgiveness. It was recognition. A quiet truce between two people who had spent far too long surviving inside a system that wasn't built for them. And now, finally, neither of them was alone. Mariah didn't return to school with fanfare. No welcome back banners, no apologies, no acknowledgments. Just the same shiny floors, the same lemon-scented hallways, the same cold stares that either looked too long or not at all. But something had shifted, and not just in the air around her. She had stopped expecting protection. Now she started building her own. On her first day back, she walked into Ash Grove High at 7:32 a.m., head high, braid gone, a small black notebook tucked inside the front pocket of her backpack. She didn't carry it like a diary. She carried it like a tool, like a weapon. The silence hadn't ended. It had evolved. Teachers glanced her way but quickly looked down. Students whispered behind hands, casting side eyes she pretended not to see. Kyle had returned, his wrist in a soft brace, walking a little slower now. Brandon had transferred out of district. No public announcement, just gone. Austin, though, was still here, still lingering near the back tables, quieter, watching more than talking. They didn't touch her now, but that didn't mean they were done. So she watched them too, and she wrote, Monday, 9:41 a.m. Austin follows Latina girl out of gym. She turns around. He smirks. She looks uncomfortable. Monday, 11:03 a.m. Teacher ignores raised hand of Malik, black student, 3 times. Calls on white student behind him. Tuesday, 12:18 p.m. Lunch. Food thrown across table toward Ahmed. Laughter. No staff response. She tracked time down to the minute. Faces, patterns, tone. Who laughed? Who stayed silent? Who looked and turned away? The notebook filled fast. By Friday, Mariah had already documented 5 separate incidents, none directly aimed at her, but all too familiar. She didn't confront. She didn't raise her voice. She just kept writing. After school that week, she walked into Principal Lawson's office without knocking. He looked up from a stack of emails, his shirt sleeves rolled to the elbow, exhaustion in the slump of his shoulders but fire still steady behind his eyes. "You okay?" he asked. Mariah nodded once. "I brought something." She placed the notebook on his desk, opened to a page labeled Week 1. He skimmed it slowly. No dramatic reaction, just a sharp breath through his nose. Then a low, almost reverent whistle. "You track this in 5 days?" She folded her arms. "You said make it undeniable." He leaned back in his chair. "You've been listening." She didn't smile. "They haven't stopped. They've just changed tactics." "I know," Lawson said. "Now they'll try policy, dress code, disruptive behavior, aggressive tone. They'll look for anything they can twist to say you're the problem." "So I'm bait?" "No," he replied. "You're leverage." He reached into his drawer and pulled out another folder, thinner than hers but organized. Inside were notes, emails, flagged reports. 3 names jumped out immediately. Naomi, sophomore. Locker vandalized. Report dismissed. Terrence, junior. Academic misconduct accusation after challenging teacher's comment. Jade, freshman. Lunchroom bullying. No follow-up. Mariah's brow furrowed. "All of them, black or brown?" "All of them," Lawson confirmed. "I started collecting these last semester. Patterns too small to scream, but too consistent to ignore." She looked at the names again. None of them had fought back. None of them had made it public. None of them had been believed. Lawson's voice dropped. "If you see anything, write it down. Teachers, students, staff, names, times, locations. Keep it tight. Don't engage unless it's urgent. You're not alone in this." Mariah closed the notebook, slid it back into her bag. "You think they'll try again?" "I don't think," he said. I know. She exhaled through her nose. Good. Let them. Because this wasn't about one braid. It wasn't about one fight. It was about every time someone like her was told to keep her head down and take it. Now she wasn't taking anything. She was recording everything. It started with a video. Nothing flashy, no edits, no dramatic music, just a single angle from the northeast corner of the art room, a grainy security feed capturing everything. The moment Brandon walked up behind Mariah, the way the scissors hovered, the sharp motion, the braid falling, the laughter, her stillness. No blood, no punches, yet. But the silence in that video, it was louder than anything else. Principal Lawson sent the footage to the district office, along with Mariah's documentation. He didn't warn anyone. He didn't ask permission. He just submitted it, alongside scanned pages of her notebook and a formal incident report that included a pattern of racial targeting. He CC'd the superintendent, the board chair, and the district's legal counsel. Then he waited. The response wasn't immediate, but the pressure was. That weekend, a local education journalist named Lena Mercer caught wind of the submission. Young, sharp, and tired of the safe story she was assigned, Lena reached out, first to Lawson, then to Mariah. She didn't want a headline. She wanted the truth. When she met Mariah, she didn't bring lights or a big crew, just one camera, a tripod, a microphone. You say what you want, Lena told her. No more. No less. They filmed in the school's media room after hours. The hallways were empty. The hum of the vending machines in the distance was the only noise. Mariah sat at the table, hands in her lap, face unreadable. She didn't talk about the punch. She talked about the moment after the braid hit the floor, about sitting in a bathroom stall, clutching what was left of her hair, listening to the laughter outside, about what it meant to be humiliated for who you were, and then expected to take it quietly. She didn't ask for sympathy. She didn't cry. She spoke like someone who had already bled the worst of it out and now had only truth left. When Lena asked what justice would look like, Mariah said simply, I just want the truth to stop being quiet. The interview was uploaded to the outlet's YouTube page 2 days later. No push notifications, no viral thumbnail, just a title, Student Speaks After Ash Grove Incident. And still, it spread. By Monday morning, parents were calling the school. Not to defend their kids, but to ask questions. What happened? Why wasn't it reported sooner? Why didn't anyone stop it? Then the anonymous emails began. A former teacher admitted she'd filed a report last year when Brandon harassed a Somali student in the cafeteria and was told to document it and move on. A guidance counselor forwarded an old chain where concerns about racial tension were met with, let's not inflame things unnecessarily. Miss Chandler, a young English teacher who had once dared to raise her voice in a staff meeting about equity, reposted the interview on her personal page. Her caption was short, this isn't new, it's just finally visible. 3 days later, she was quietly removed from the school's professional development committee. The silence around Mariah had cracked. Now it was bleeding. By Friday, the superintendent had scheduled an internal review of disciplinary patterns at Ash Grove High. And Principal Lawson, he kept his head down and his files organized. He responded to emails with attached video timestamps. He answered vague questions with precise data. He wasn't playing defense. He was laying a trail. Because he knew the moment was coming. The moment when the district couldn't pretend it didn't know. Couldn't pretend it hadn't seen. Couldn't pretend Mariah was the problem. The notebook was no longer just hers. It was part of a record, and the record was starting to speak. The system didn't collapse. It retaliated. The Monday after the interview aired, 3 black SUVs pulled into the staff parking lot before 8 a.m. A silver Lexus followed close behind. By 8:15, A white BMW with out-of-state plates rolled up and parked in the reserved visitor slot. None of the drivers were school staff. They were parents, well-dressed, well-connected, loud in the way that didn't require yelling, just presence, the kind of people whose emails got returned within the hour, the kind of people who didn't wait in lobbies. By 9 a.m., Principal Lawson was standing in the school conference room, facing 6 parents, 3 fathers, 3 mothers. Their expressions were tight, their coats expensive, their watches gleaming beneath crisp sleeves. One of them, a man in a tan trench coat and power tie, stepped forward. "Let's not waste time," he said. "My son came home with a black eye. He's afraid to return to school. And the girl who did it, still walking the halls." "She was suspended," Lawson replied evenly. 3 days, per district policy. The blonde woman next to him snapped, "That wasn't a suspension-level offense. That was an attack." Lawson didn't blink. "It was a response." The room froze. Another parent, the one whose son had wielded the scissors, folded his arms. "You're defending her." "I'm documenting facts," Lawson said calmly. "Your son's approached a student, cut her hair without consent, laughed, mocked her. That's assault and emotional violence. Her response was physical, yes, but it wasn't unprovoked." "You don't understand," the blonde said, voice sharpening. "You're justifying violence against white students." "No," Lawson replied, leaning in slightly. "I'm just not erasing the rest of the story to make your sons the victims." It wasn't the answer they were expecting, and they didn't take it well. "You're going to lose your job over this," one father warned. "We have connections at the board, at the district." Lawson's tone didn't change. "Then I'll lose it doing the right thing." That afternoon, the emails began. Dozens. Parents CCing board members, threatening lawsuits, demanding Mariah's expulsion, calling the environment hostile. One message even suggested that Lawson had cultivated an atmosphere of racial grievance. He read them all, printed them, filed them. Then he responded with timestamps, video evidence, incident logs, disciplinary patterns. And when the district pushed for silence, he pushed back with documentation. The final blow came when someone, no one ever said who, leaked the footage from the lunchroom. The video of Mariah sitting alone, Brandon throwing food, Kyle whispering behind her, Austin saying, "Why don't you smile?" And then the stare, the moment she looked at him, the moment everything changed. It spread like wildfire. The same parents who had called her unstable now had to explain what the world could see with their own eyes, that their sons weren't victims of violence, they were architects of it. And Mariah, she had simply stopped allowing it. By the end of the week, Brandon was gone. Kyle had transferred. Austin still walked the halls, but quieter now, smaller, because the system had tried to fight back. But it didn't count on being recorded. It didn't count on a notebook or a principal who refused to back down. And it definitely didn't count on a girl who had learned to turn silence into strategy and strategy into power. The district called it a restorative response. That was the language they used in the press release, measured, polished, and empty. But for Mariah, there was nothing restorative about what she'd endured. What came next wasn't healing, it was reckoning. A week after the video went public, the school board issued a formal statement acknowledging a failure to properly escalate prior complaints. That one sentence, buried in paragraph 5, told the truth without ever saying her name. Principal Lawson received a quiet commendation. Mariah received a meeting request from the superintendent's office, the kind of meeting students usually don't get invited to, the kind held in downtown district buildings with ceilings too high and lights too bright. She wore a plain black sweater and jeans. No jewelry, no performance, just presence. The room was filled with board members, district staff, and legal counsel. Some looked at her with curiosity, a few with discomfort, but Lawson sat beside her, tie loosened, hands folded, still and steady. She wasn't alone. They asked her questions. How did it begin? What could have been done differently? What do you want now? She didn't raise her voice. She didn't soften either. I want a school where my dignity isn't negotiable, she said, where silence isn't expected from the students who are most targeted, where someone doesn't have to bleed before you start paying attention. She paused and then added, and I want to make sure I'm not the last one who gets to say this in this room. The room was silent after that, not because they disagreed, but because they knew they had nothing prepared to say in return. 2 days later, the board announced a new policy: mandatory racial sensitivity and bias training for all school staff, creation of an anonymous reporting system monitored by an external oversight group, a full review of disciplinary practices across all schools in the district. No one mentioned Mariah by name in the rollout, but everyone knew why it was happening. Austin quietly withdrew before the new semester. No goodbye, no formal notice, just an empty desk and a locker cleared out overnight. His absence said more than any speech he could have given. And Mariah? She didn't walk the halls with her head down anymore. Not because the building had changed, but because she had. Teachers no longer called on her with hesitation. Some greeted her with quiet nods. A few avoided her altogether. That was fine. She wasn't looking for admiration. She wasn't trying to be anyone's hero. She just wanted truth to have weight. And now it did. One afternoon, as she crossed the courtyard heading home, a freshman girl, shy, bookish, barely 5 feet tall, caught up beside her. You're Mariah, right? Mariah slowed her pace. Yeah. The girl nodded quickly, eyes wide but serious. They used to mess with my cousin. A lot. But they don't anymore. So, thanks. Mariah didn't say anything right away, just gave a small nod. The kind that said, I see you without needing to say more. Because this wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about punishment. It was about something bigger than that. It was about earning a kind of justice that doesn't come with a headline or a handshake. The kind that isn't given. The kind you take back. One name, one note, one truth at a time. The school didn't look different. Same linoleum floors, same echo of bells through the hallways, same cafeteria trays and humming vending machines. But something underneath had shifted, subtle, steady, and real. Students still gathered in clusters. Teachers still checked their watches between periods. But now when Mariah walked by, people noticed. Not out of fear, not out of pity, but out of recognition. She wasn't a symbol. She was proof. She no longer carried the notebook, not because she didn't need it, but because others had picked up the work. A small group of students, Latina, Black, first-gen, queer, had started meeting after school, not with protest signs or slogans, but with spreadsheets, timestamp logs, and policy printouts. They called themselves the Accountability Circle. No teacher supervised, no one needed to. Mariah wasn't their leader. She didn't need to be. She'd already shown them the blueprint. The school board's new policies rolled out quietly, language about bias mitigation and equitable discipline, folded into staff memos and back-to-school training slides. It wasn't sweeping change, but it was documented, visible, permanent. Principal Lawson stayed behind the scenes. He didn't do interviews. He didn't take credit, but his eyes stayed sharp in staff meetings, and his email inbox was now a fortress of receipts. Once, as Mariah passed his office, he caught her eye and said simply, "Well done." She didn't need anything more. At home, things softened too. Not dramatically. Her parents didn't suddenly become emotional or affectionate, but they were present. Her mother started making tea in the evenings again, placing a cup on the table without a word, sitting across from Mariah and scrolling quietly through the news. Sometimes her father would pause when her name flashed on a headline. He never said much, but he always nodded. It wasn't closure, but it was care. A month before the semester ended, Mariah returned to the boxing gym where her cousin Darius still trained. The building still smelled like sweat and floor polish, still echoed with the thud of glove against pad. He spotted her across the floor and tossed her a pair of gloves without a word. "You ready?" he asked. She tightened her wraps, slow and methodical. "I never stopped." They sparred in silence, just motion and breath and memory. After the second round, as she leaned against the ropes catching her breath, he looked at her and said, "You didn't swing too soon. You waited. Then you finished." Mariah didn't answer. She didn't have to. The last week of school came with warm weather and drifting attention spans. But even in the looseness of final days, the shift was visible. Mariah sat in the middle of the cafeteria now, not because she wanted attention, but because she could. One afternoon, a new student passed by, young, shoulders hunched, looking for a place to sit. Mariah caught her eye, then nodded to the empty chair beside her. "You can sit here," she said. No speech, no performance, just space. That moment, that simple act, was the monument. Not stone, not bronze, but movement. Memory. A girl who was once humiliated for her presence, now making space for someone else's. That night, in her room, she unpacked her backpack and found the braid, tucked between the pages of an old notebook. She held it in her hand, not with shame, but with reverence. Then she placed it in a box, shut the lid, and slid it to the highest shelf in her closet. Not to forget, but to remember who she became after they tried to take something from her. She didn't need a statue. She was one, a monument in motion. Mariah never set out to change a system. She just wanted to survive it. She didn't ask to be brave, didn't plan to become a voice. She was a girl who walked into a classroom, had a piece of her taken, and chose not to shrink, but to stand. And that choice? It rippled, not through headlines or hashtags, but through hallways, through the quiet conversations between students who'd never spoken before, through the notebooks passed hand to hand, through the teachers who now paused a little longer before dismissing a complaint, through the administrators who finally understood that neutrality in the face of injustice was just another kind of violence. Mariah didn't win because the system gave her anything. She won because she documented, she endured, she refused to disappear. Her victory wasn't in expelling the boys or forcing transfers. It wasn't even in the policy changes, though they mattered. Her victory was in reclaiming space, in walking through the same front doors they once hoped she'd never return through, shoulders back, gaze steady, unbothered. It was in teaching others, without ever saying so, that their silence had power too, when they chose to aim it. Sometimes justice doesn't come with applause. Sometimes it's quiet, like a chair pulled out for someone new, like a notebook passed across a desk, like a teacher finally listening. Mariah wasn't a hero, she was a reminder. That dignity doesn't have to be earned, that respect isn't a reward, that being seen, truly seen, should never require pain first. So if you remember anything from her story, let it be this. They tried to reduce her to a joke, to silence, to shame, but she made herself undeniable. And in a world that often pretends not to notice until it's too late, that may be the bravest thing of all.